are formulated at a very critical age of our development, usually between 0 and 6 years old. And then you have another critical age of development, which is between 6 and 12, where this rule really get confirmed. But the 0 to 6 is so, so fundamental. And why do we speak about this? We speak about this because when we look at trauma, we are looking at early life experiences that have a long-term impact, Rene, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You have been recounting a lot of stories from people that you know, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, in what way does it make sense for you to think that the brain formulates the rules by which it has to live by at a very early stage of life? That does anything come to mind to you when I say that?
Absolutely. A couple of anecdotes I've shared before of how my friend grew up without a father. He was rejected very early on, and even your own anecdote last time, whereby your neighbor went through a divorce, and also that affected them. So that's how I'm combining the two anecdotes and realizing that that kind of formulation is so heavy.
Yes.
So many examples. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we say that, then let's say childhood then is a very critical age of development, right? And last time we introduced this adverse childhood experience ACE test, and the reason why we
Yes.
do that is because it focuses on understanding the kind of experiences that we have had in childhood that might have a very long-term impact. So the background today, we will be going through a second question of the AC, of the AC. Here it is, very good. Um, of the ACE test. And just to give you a little background of this test, first of all, it's absolutely a standard in trauma work. So all
Yeah.
my clients will be going through this test because I need to know how many scores they get, right? So you score 1 point for every question that you answer positively. There are 10 questions. Today we present one of them, although there are sort of various sections to it. And if you say yes to what we'll be discussing, then that's 1 point for you. And last time we talked about separation and divorce. There are
Yeah.
three groups of questions in this test. There are questions that focus on household dysfunction, as we call it. So separation and divorce is part of household dysfunction. It brings dysregulation into the family system to have a separation and a divorce. This question here today focuses on a second group of questions, which is all about abuse, whether it's
Mm.
emotional, physical, sexual, psychological, or other. So the background of this test is also maybe interesting to know that it was developed by surveying 17,000 people. So quite a large number of people back in the 1990s, actually. So by now it's hundreds of thousands of people that have been surveyed. But it comes out of, I think it's Dr. Felipe, who was doing research with people who wanted to lose weight. So he was working in a clinic with people who wanted to lose weight, and he noticed that the people that had the biggest difficulties in losing weight often, almost by accident, spoke of grave accidents or sort of very significant experiences that they had in childhood. And so he started kind of being curious about this, and he asked more questions to more people. And then eventually he started to realize that there was a connection between later on, like adult health outcomes and childhood experiences. And that's how the test came about, really. So today we are covering this question. A parent or other adult in the household often or very often either swore at you, insulted you, put you down, or humiliated you in front of other people, in front of other members of the family, for example. Or B, acted in a way that made you feel afraid that they might actually hurt you, right? So living in fear that my primary caretaker, my parent, is going to hurt me physically, that also accounts for trauma later on. Why? Because as we were saying at the very beginning of this series on trauma, trauma essentially is our emotional brains being on hyper alert. Right?
Yeah.
If you're constantly afraid that your parent is going to kick you, or physically hit you, then you are on hyper alert as to, what not to do principally, or what to do, to please the parent. Often that results in us becoming very high people pleasers. um, so fearful environments often lead to high people pleasing behavior. That's another thing that we'll be talking more in depth other time. So today we focus on this question, and just to give an example, Rene, I will
Yeah.
share a little story of my own. Something that to this day, in fact, I think maybe even like 3 or 4 days ago, this image came back to my mind, but it's been a constant in my life. So I lost my mother to suicide when I was 2 years old, and 3 years later, I lost my sister to drowning. So very, very strong events in my life. And 1 year after my sister um, drowned, we left Morocco, and therefore I also lost my dog, to whom I'd become very attached, and my nanny, who had been there since I was 6 months old. A new woman came into this broken family system now. It was only my father and myself. And this woman, unfortunately, was rather physically abusive. And 3 years into this sort of new family system, I remember so clearly one day this woman screaming on the top of her lungs, telling uh, that prostitute of your mother. Now, in Italian, in Italy, it will sound different. But it's a little bit difficult to translate in that bitch or that whore of your mother, basically, right? These three words. I was 9. I didn't know what a whore was back then.
Mm,
I didn't know what a sex worker was, a prostitute was back then, but it just stuck with me. I knew that something was really wrong. And of course, today I understand the implications of that. And also, to speak sort of in favor of this abuser, not so much in favor, but sort of to legitimate at a certain extent this abuser, I must say that the language this person was using was very normal in the context of Roman culture, Southern Italy culture. So
mm,
if you go to Italy or interact with Italians and they are from the south of Italy, very often they'll swear just in normal dialogue. So it's kind of very normalized. And this person grew up there, and she was bringing that culture with her in my family, right? So the way that she might have said it might not have sounded uh, so incredibly important to her. In fact, I confronted her some 30 years later after this event, and of course she couldn't remember, right? So it was nothing for
mm,
this person, but for me, it really, really stuck. To be told them, as I say, I didn't even understand the word. So it
mm,
was really the emotional tone and the sharpness and the loudness of whatever three words she used back then that conveyed a certain amount of violence.
mm,
And I never forgot it. My brain never forgot it. To this day, spontaneously, whether it's within a dream or when I'm down and, all sorts of negative thoughts enter my mind, or where I'm trying to make peace with my family life, this image will come back up. And it's very hard for me to go past it without noticing it, without stopping on it, and again, having to sort of understand what really went on in that experience. And this is so typical of trauma. These images are so capturing, so captivating. And going back to them can be a bad habit in a way, but also it's the only way to go and heal, is to go back to the images and to develop a new relationship with them. So that's my example. Does this trigger anything for you, Rene? Or what do you think? How do you feel about it? If you
I
were
think
me, how would you have felt?
I think even at that very young age, when you just mentioned that before you were 10, actually before you were 6, these two particular tragedies happened, and then now you had to lose the dog, and now you have to embrace or welcome someone in your life, but they are not welcoming. So it was such a heavy, heavy kind of stress on you, and to find out that their kind of expression towards you that you would want to accommodate is so vicious, and you understand the weight of it later, because at the time you just knew, okay, whatever she's saying and how she said it cannot be a good thing.
Right.
You're addressing my mother. I love my mother, but how you're addressing it, maybe I don't understand the weight of the term you're saying, but it seems that you have so much hate towards someone that she has never met.
Yes.
And I can
I
imagine.
love the way that you put it, how you simplify the equation here.
Yeah,
In those three words, there was the word mother, which I
yeah,
knew, right?
yeah,
And then there was this vibe, right? This emotion,
yeah,
which certainly was not a positive emotion and certainly was not soft and sweet and calming
yeah,
and soothing. So you have this clash in my brain between the image or the bodily sort of attachment I have to my mother, which is going to be positive, and this explosive anger or hatred. Right? And that is enough. That is enough to create what it created in my brain, which is properly classified as trauma.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is actually should be classified that way, and the fact that you really felt that you needed to address it 30 years later. That, wait a minute, you made this attack at this person that at that point maybe you felt that you couldn't defend, maybe you should have defended, or maybe, but you couldn't, and now you want to address that. Hey, what was that expression about? And now you're met with complete, denial, or
Yeah.
just that it was nothing, or that nothing like that ever happened.
Yes. And this is not surprising. If you work in this field, if you begin to understand trauma and hear stories of trauma, denial is 99.90% of the cases.
Mm,
The abuser will deny their abuses in 99.9% of the cases. Unless they are very, very highly pressured to confront the abuse by society, courts, other family members, and so on and so on. But if they can get away with it, let's even speak more generally speaking. If the brain can get away with something it has done that is unjust, and that it carries guilt and shame for, it will try everything to avoid confrontation with that act. So we are
mhm,
very self-deceiving when it comes down to recognizing the kind of hurt that we have produced on others, unless we are very, very high on conscientiousness. But if we were very high on conscientiousness, which means the capacity to recognize the value of our actions day by day, then we would normally go back to that person and proactively re-engage that person in positive ways, such as asking for forgiveness, explaining the state that we're in, and so on and so on. Abusers do not come from that, or even, again, probably more properly said, the state of mind of an abuser, which can be any one of us, does not process the world in those terms.
mm.
So
So
denial is a normal reaction.
that's such a insightful thing to say, and the fact that you addressed it and you mentioned high alert. So I can imagine after that denial, is it typical or classical to have someone still on that high alert, that someone who actually attacked you said there's nothing to be alert about? Does it any way help that high alertness that you already had?
Yes, I like this question. When I talk to this person, and by the way, I hadn't seen this person for 20 years. And, I went back to Italy and gathered all my courage to be able to confront this person, call up this person, ask them for a meeting. And I remember them coming to with the car at a particular location we had agreed. And I was expecting a good meeting because on the phone this person, she had been rather welcoming of the initiative. And I remember entering the car, and the first word that greeted me was stronzetto. Come va stronzetto? How are you, little dickhead?
Mm.
You know, and again, it's just like in the context of Roman culture, stronzetto is almost a cute way of calling someone. Like, just to give you an example, the other day I was asking a bunch of friends to click on a link and then select from a bunch of words that they feel they could identify in me, right? And a friend of mine who have been friends since I was an adolescent, actually from Rome, he said there was one label missing there, stronzetto. You know,
Mm.
so little dickhead, right? So it is very like it is very in the mood of the culture, in the language of the culture, in the humor and the joke of the culture. Okay.
Mhm.
And as I often bring back to these discussions is the element of culture. Okay. This person was conditioned at a very critical age of her development. She was conditioned to behave, think, and speak in that way, right? So why is the word stronzetto, for me as an adult now, knowing all that I know about Roman culture, not appropriate in that context?
Mm.
Because I don't feel safe with this person.
Mhm.
Okay, so the hyper alertness there um, comes from the fact that I've never been able to feel safe with this person. In fact, in that conversation that I had, in that meeting that I had, we did clarify that a major shift occurred when I was 9 years old. As I told you, 3 years had passed, and this event happened of the, you know, your mother is a whore. Um, and from that moment on, I just switched off with this person.
Mm.
I, you know, if there was a chance that this person could act as my pseudo mother or take the role of my mother, that chance was completely gone after that. You know? and 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 yeah, she agreed that something had shifted. What had shifted? My probably my emotional state towards her. Right, I was in constant hyper alert.
Yeah.
Um, by the way, there is another thing that I want to tell about um, this person and how violence operates and denial as well. I remember I was 21. I returned to Italy for a few months. I'd been in Australia for a year and I returned to Italy. And my stepbrother and stepsister were at that time 9 and 3 years old or something like that.
Mhm.
And this person goes on a fury, like a rage, um, outburst again. And she wants to beat the two children, the small children. And so I take them behind my wing at 21 and I say, stop, you're not gonna hurt them, right? And in that moment, she screams at me, I am their mother and I will always be their mother no matter what.
Mm.
And you know what strikes me about this event is not so much that she knew that whatever she did, she would always be her mother. But the fact that at 49 years old now, I realized that she was right.
Mhm.
Nothing that you can do to your children will ever take away their feeling that you are their father or their mother. And to me, that strikes an incredible note on the importance of these two care figures, which will come back over and over and again in these discussions about trauma, Rene.
That is such a weighty story of shared, and it's so much you can unpack just from this particular question. I think we can even pick up from it from the next live. How you've just got to experience this as a child and got to experience it again as an adult, and getting to relive it and understand that what she said, even though delivery was wrong at 21, she was right. It was a fact she shared. The delivery was not right, but it was a fact. And also the term, how the term was used, it could have been normalized, but you didn't have the rapport with the person using that term. and
Yes.
it really created something experience for you, and
Yeah.
the traumatic experience
This
for you.
question definitely grants for more discussion. So I'm
Absolutely.
happy to continue on this conversation next time with you. Next week, Renee.
Absolutely. Next week, for those who have subscribed, you, as we always say, you will get the immediate notification when we are coming on live. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for this particular session with us.
Thank you. Thank you very
It's
much,
been a
Renee.
great
Thank
one,
you,
guys.
everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao. We go back next week.